Good morning, fellow Plexers. I'm about to start a project helping Christian over in the UK get his Plex-based Synology NAS server going. I'm still looking for answers to certain questions, but I thought I'd lay out what's going on. And this video is for you, Christian, too, so you can see how better to answer my questions, and we can talk about some things I suspect right off the bat with what you've described as your setup. But I need to know your NAS model. I know you're running DSM 7.1, some version of it. I know that Plex is installed as a Synology package. I assume that it's a RAID and not JBOD setup. JBOD is basically starting over to set your NAS up right, but I'd like to know your RAID type and the file system that it's set up under. And most importantly, was Plex installed before the NAS was upgraded to DSM 7, or was it installed afterwards? If it was installed first under DSM 6, there really should have been prep work done, and Plex gave you some instructions on some things to do during the transition. A lot of people had servers that wouldn't work right because the prep wasn't followed correctly. Some people started fresh. Some people used the resources of I think it was a Black Void article. If you search Plex Synology upgrade Black Void, all is one word, BLACKVOID. They go through the steps necessary before the upgrade, and they try to help fix a post-upgrade that wasn't prepped. So this is probably very important. So for anybody watching, Christian's issues are his music library disappeared, and he wants to save his playlist in that library, but then other libraries are incomplete. So in a Facebook post, he told me how his folder structure is set up, and this is very concerning. So he has a NAS home shared folder from what I can gather. Then he has these three subfolders in that shared folder. Then under the subfolder named Plex, he has subfolders of films, music, and photos. I don't know why there's a photos at this level and then there's another photos above it at that level. But this is concerning. He also tells me that he has a folder inside NAS home that is called Plex Media Server, spelled this way. And on a Synology package install under DSM 7, the install will create its own shared folder with this folder structure. App Data, Plex Media Server. See how there's spaces between each word here and there's not here. And then inside this working application folder are many subfolders starting with cache and codecs. So let's go to my older Synology NAS, a DS1019, that's mostly used for tutorial videos and as a backup repository for my DS1520 that holds all my Plex media. So first off, let's go to File Station. I need some screenshots of this right here to see what you have, because the install folder for Plex should be all by itself. It should not be inside of some other shared media folder. And I follow the advice of Matthew Peterson out of Australia, who has done his own Plex videos under a Synology NAS and Unraid. He's very knowledgeable about Docker. He runs the Dockerholics Plexbook group. And his advice is to not use any spaces or to use any uppercase letters in your folder structure for your Plex media. So this is an example of all public domain media in a shared folder. It could be named media, it could be named Plex media. I've named it media PD for public domain. All lowercase, no spaces. If I click into that, I'm a little different. I recommend using a sort folder for each library type. if you watch any of Robbie's Plex setup videos under a Synology NAS, a QNAP NAS, an All-Store NAS, he's always recommending the same thing. 5 separate library folders for each type of Plex library, but he's assuming you're only going to have one movie library, one music library, one TV show library, and that you're not going to have multiple photo libraries or multiple other video libraries. I just advise adding this nesting structure. So if I go into the movie library sort folder, these are the actual library folders you could point different Plex libraries at. So if you start small, you're only going to have a movie library, and this could be named movie and this could be named movie. It doesn't matter as long as the main movie library points to this level. And then later on, if you want to branch off and put documentaries in a separate Plex movie library, you just name it movie-documentary. Same thing with 4K content, same thing with kids content. If you add in an HD home run tuner and you want to keep anything you DVR on Plex movie media separately because it has commercials in it, you can add a movie-DVR library. Same for the TV show setup. If you don't have kids or grandkids, you're probably never going to have a separate kids TV show library, but this sorted folder structure allows these individual. So you can have a main series library, a kids series library, an anime series library, and you can add in a separate library for DVR content off your HD home run tuner that has commercials in it if you don't want to mix that content into your main library. So that's about the only area I disagree with Robbie. And if you look on Plex for a lot of Docker guides, there's a lot. I use Marius Hosting as how to set up containers. It's a great resource. He's a fantastic instructor, but when he sets up his containers, he's only giving the path to one media library, and it might make you think that you should have a second shared folder or a third shared folder for TV shows and music versus just having everything in one shared folder. So directory structure is huge to me on a foundational level for a Plex server that's going to last forever. So I do need to see some screenshots of this. So just start off with everything closed, and anything related to Plex open up like this. I need to verify where your Plex install is. Hopefully it's just like this and you misspoke. And if this is your, I don't know, NAS home or whatever it is, open it up like that, give me a screenshot, and then open up other things and give me a screenshot. I'm a Linux guy. If you're using Windows, I think Windows is similar to Pop! OS in a screenshot. Some Linux distros, you press the screenshot button on your keyboard, and a PNG file is just created, and you can just rename it and use it. Well, Pop! OS is kind of like Windows, so watch, if I hit the screenshot button, I get this little thing where I can do this to create a screenshot. I can size it for the whole screen, or I can just size it to a window. I press the shutter button here, it copies to the clipboard. If you don't know what to do with it, then install GIMP. It's free, it's a shareware program, it's huge in the Linux world. You don't need to know much about it besides to get it open. You right click, choose edit, choose paste. You go to file, export as, drop down here to select file type, find JPEG or find PNG. Probably JPEG if you're using Windows. I'll do PNG. Give it a name. I got lost here. All right, so I just called it screenshot test. It's going in my documents folder. You can change that. I can put it in the download, whatever you want. And then hit export. Don't worry about this. Hit export. And now you have that screenshot on your drive that you can drop into Messenger to me. I'm going to need to see a lot of screenshots if we're working together. I do not remote access into anybody's computer. I don't even know how to do that. I don't want to learn how to do that to help you. We're going to probably do a phone call over Facebook Messenger, and screenshots and information will be passed back and forth just through the regular Messenger interface. So GIMP is what you want to use. Unless you already know how to do this with whatever Windows tool you have available, but you really need to practice this to learn how to do it pretty quickly to process a screenshot. All right, so I need to see the screenshots of the folder structure, and in case you don't know my mistake, I'm going to pause this video for a second, because when I start my Windows, my Chrome app back up for the Synology NAS, it will give away my quick sync ID. So let me just pause it. All right, I'm back. Yeah, for about 5 seconds, the quick sync ID shows up here in this Chrome app. So I also need you to go to Storage Manager, and I assume it's a RAID type. If you go into we can go into Storage Pool 1 here. You'll see it says Synology Hybrid RAID SHR. It's not really SHR, it's SHR2, because we have data protection for 2 drive fault tolerance. SHR plain would just say this with 1 drive fault tolerance. Then if you click on volume, let me see, where am I going next? So this little down arrow here under volume span 1, this little down arrow, this will tell you the file system you've picked. So that's how you get the rest of the information. All right, so the big question, Christian, is how important are the playlists to you? Because if you don't have a good foundation under you, your current Plex server install is not going to go into the future easily and without issue. So let's go back to my own file folder under Linux. All right, so just got the file manager that came with this distro. If I go to other locations, this is my test unraid install, and here's my DS1520, here's my DS1019. This is how the Plex Media Server should be installed, as I already showed. And you should have one shared media folder for all your Plex media. It can be named anything, but to follow the no cases and spaces rule, I'd like to see it named simply like this, maybe just media. And if you don't like the idea of my sort folders, that's okay. But if we go into the actual movie libraries, so if you don't like the sort folder idea and you're only going to have 1 movie or maybe 2 movie libraries, that library folder should be named the right way. And then when you get into it, that's where you return to normal naming structure. So a Plex movie should be named exactly as it appears at either IMDb or TMDB. I use TMDB as my Plex movie naming Bible. And I have FileBot include the source ID and the folder name. And even though it's unnecessary, in the file name too. And then I have FileBot insert some media characteristics into the file name. And a Plex Pass also lets me employ edition tag naming. So these two different copies of this movie will scan in at the same time if they're added both at once as two separate entries, and this one will have remastered listed underneath it. If this edition tag wasn't in the file name, or I didn't have a Plex Pass, both these movies would scan in as one, and then you could choose which one to play from Plex's interface, but it wouldn't tell you the difference between them besides the resolution and the bit rate. And as you can see, these are both the same resolution, so the only difference I'd see would be the bit rate. So that's edition tag naming for a Plex movie library without a Plex Pass. You can use versioning naming, so you can have two copies that are different versions, and I illustrate that here by having the resolutions and the rest of the media characteristics in the file name. Plex scans this as one movie that you can then choose to play based on resolution and bit rate. And then I do something similar for the TV show libraries. Now my sort folder above this allows me to have a main movie library, kids library, one specifically for DVR and one for anime. And this is just kind of all test media. And I don't need a source ID for a TV show. I do set my Plex TV show libraries up to pull all episode ordering from TVDB instead of TMDB, which is default, and I name everything to the entries at TVDB. But I don't find a source ID is necessary to use, and Plex scans all this stuff in perfectly. Now the big issue is a music library, and that's what I wanted to kind of get this foundational conversation out first. I use Music Brains Picard, but I move all my media back to my PC. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me open this with Music Brains Picard. Music Brains Picard won't write to the media if opened on my computer back to the NAS. And you see it's struggling to open. And it didn't open. So let me do this. Let me copy these. And let me move into my local computer. And let me just create a folder called Music. And I'll explain why things are not lowercase here in a second. All right, so this is not much. I'm copying it over fast. So if I now open this with Music Brains Picard, which opened off screen, oh, it was already opened off screen. All right, so I'm not a pro YouTuber. I don't script anything. If I run into trouble and anybody watching can see me get out of trouble, it should give them confidence to get out of trouble too. Okay, so this is already found. This is where you want to end up with. This is not going to be a Music Brains Picard tutorial, but the gold CD references a metadata that's in the database. And if I open it up and click on a song, you see all the good metadata. So if you have music that doesn't have good metadata injected into it, you can load it into Music Brains Picard. It shows up over here as unclustered. You click clustered. Then you go back to the clustered list, pick your album, you pick scan. Hopefully it matches up. If not, you manually nudge it to the right match. And then once it's got the gold CD, you hit save. And then Plex will scan that music media in perfectly. So in a series library or a movie library, Plex relies on structure over metadata. Now you can adjust the library settings for a movie library or a TV show library to use embedded metadata, to use local metadata, but the default settings, everything's based on the naming structure and the actual media file name to make a good match. That is not the case with a music library. A music library depends on embedded metadata. So say I had the Beatles' The White Album, but I didn't actually have that album, but I had every other Beatles album you could imagine, and I wanted to recreate the White Album by copying songs from other albums to represent that. And chances are the same song on different albums might be a different version of the song, might have a different runtime, but I'm going to ignore all that. I'm just going to create my own album and rename the files that way. Well, when Plex scans that, it's going to scan it as all the other albums. But if you stole 2 songs from the Revolver album, and I don't know if that matches up with the White Album, but if you stole 2 songs from the Revolver album, and you already have the Revolver album, Plex is going to scan in a new Revolver entry that only has 2 songs in it because it's getting all that information from the metadata. So with the default Plex library structure for music, this is really more for your benefit than it is for Plex. So you have an artist, and normally then you'd have the album folders, and inside the album folder you'd have the music. Like this one. This is just public domain. I don't have to worry about the media playing if I happen to show it on Plex. So I have the artist folder. I have the album, and really, because the metadata is good, I can have whatever naming structure that works for me. If you want to see things sorted alphabetically, name it this way. If you want to see things sorted by year when you go into your folder structure, name it like that. It really doesn't matter because Plex is going to scan this in based on the embedded metadata. And it doesn't really matter how the actual music files are named either. Plex just doesn't care with a music library. So when I first added my music library to Plex, I've been collecting music since the dial-up days, and through Usenet. I had a really old and I thought pretty cool music collection. Well, when I had Plex scan it on my first NAS, it was the most horrendous thing you could see. Nothing, it was a huge collection, so maybe 3/4 of it scanned correctly, but the other quarter scanned in so bad it just made everything a mess. So when I bought my new NAS, I painstakingly made that a winter project. I'd copy one artist back from my NAS to my local computer, and I'd go through all the albums with Music Brains Picard. Some artists transitioned faster than others, and then when I had that fixed, then I would copy that fixed artist folder to my new folder structure on the newer NAS and let Plex scan it in. Some days you do one artist, some days you do no artists, some days you got nothing going on and you can work on 5 artists, and 2-3 months later I was done and I don't have to worry about my Plex media, my music media. So we're talking about foundational things, and let me go into my regular server folder structure. So again, I've got that same public domain media on this NAS too. My channel's DVR container records to this. I have a test I have a test package install of Plex running on this NAS too, but this is my media folder. I've named it simply Plex. And my sort folders are named very simply. If I go into the music one, there's only one Plex library folder here, which I just call main-collection. And you'll see it takes a little bit to load. And these are just all my artists, and they're not always the same. If I drop into this, you see this is the sorting structure. If I drop in here, now I've got the year afterwards. I didn't reinvent the wheel with the naming. I don't care if it's all compliant with each other, because again, Plex isn't going off that. It's going off the embedded metadata. And with the right embedded metadata, at least in my Linux file manager, you'll see the poster art embedded too. And Music Brains Picard can fix that. So I don't know if I can save your playlist, but there may be enough foundational issues going on that you may want to start fresh, and that may not be what you want to hear, but I really need to know where your Plex install is on the NAS, and it should not be in some other shared folder. And lastly, I want to go back to something else. So I said Matt Peterson recommends the folder structure that I use. That's best for a Linux install that's going to get moved around and using Docker. If you're never going to use Docker, but you do think that you might benefit from using FileBot, I'm not going to make this a FileBot tutorial, but for movies and TV shows, FileBot has a built-in expression for each that will create the folder structure while it renames your media. And when you run it, it moves it to a local folder called media. So this is great for a simple Plex install under Windows or Linux or Mac, where you're choosing to put your media in this folder. The FileBot expression will create a movies folder for movie media, or a TV show folder for TV shows. And remember, we copied this here manually. And then it creates this structure, the same TMDB source ID that I'm using, and then just a simple file name. It doesn't have that versioning information that my custom expression uses. And then the same for TV shows. It also adds a TMDB source ID, and by default, a Plex TV show library is pulling episode ordering from TMDB. Now this is a great resource for a new Plex server owner to get their media in shape. But if you watch some of my FileBot videos, you'll learn that with a TV show library in Plex, the two source IDs that you can use, either TMDB or TVDB, is not created equal. There's a lot of virtual series that didn't exist in real life that the TV database has built structure around that are in the database as a TV show, even though it wasn't. An example would be all the old Looney Tune cartoons. At TMDB, they're just considered a movie short. I think the first Looney Tune cartoon was in 1929. But the people over at TVDB were more forward-thinking, and they created that as a TV show. So those early cartoons would be season space 1929, and then all the cartoons from 1932 or from 1940 or from the 40s during the war, they're just another season, even though they never existed as a real TV show. The original Tom and Jerry movie serials are like that. TVDB lists the seasons, the 3 seasons, as season 1940, 1950, 1960. There's a Ken Burns Films entry at TVDB that doesn't exist at TMDB. Normally, for all his documentaries, they could be added if they're in the database as a movie or as their own TV show, like a PBS TV show special. But this special entry at TVDB allows you to group all his documentaries under one fake TV show listing that has metadata associated with it, and it's just a real gift to us Plex server owners who have large libraries and have content that is more easily added that way. So I only name to TVDB for TV shows, and that causes me to make one small library change globally. I can choose to pull episode ordering from TVDB, and sometimes the special season at the two databases might be different between TMDB and TVDB. So I only use TVDB as my naming Bible. And if we go back to my public domain media on my older NAS, you'll see I don't need that source ID in, as I mentioned earlier in the video, and this stuff just scans in perfectly fine. If you have to use fix match with your movie media or your series media, it just means your naming is wrong, and you really should fix the naming instead of using the crutch of fix match, because if you ever had to recreate your server from scratch while your media survived intact, if you scan 2,000 movies in at once and 20% of those had to be fix matched, that same 20% of your total movies, you'll have no idea if it scanned in as the right title, and if it didn't, how do you know what title then needs fixing with that many movies in the mix? So this is long, a lot of it's foundational, and a lot of it depends on you, whether you want a fresh start so that you never have any problems in the future. I haven't asked the question yet. How many playlists do you have that you'd have to recreate? And have you heard of the ability to create smart playlists? And maybe that's where I'll end the video. Let me bring my web app in. So let me go to my own music library, but I'll do it this way. So I have multiple servers here. The test on RAID 1 I'm working on now for some content, and these two Docker installs under both Synology NASs, and this way I can do whatever I want to one of these. If I need to mess one up in a video to help somebody, I can do it and just recover quickly. And then, of course, my regular server media on the newer NAS running on the NUC running on RAID. So I'm into that NAS in the settings. I'm going to go down to Manage Libraries. Here are all my Plex libraries. If I click into the music one, there's all my artists. I got a lot. Here's the recommended tab. I have not rebuilt my collections from my old original NAS. This is another winter project I'll do sometime. I had extensive collections with custom artwork for all the collection posters, and I haven't rebuilt that, and I want to try to do some smart playlists or some smart collections. So these are the suggested Plex playlists. So if you have anything that looks like this will come back with a new install. But from this library area, you can click the Add To, and you can create a playlist, or create a smart playlist, or create a collection or a smart collection. Now, I'm not a playlist guy, but if you create a smart playlist, it'll bring in future content that fits the criteria. And I'm not knowledgeable on playlists with a Plex server, but I am with smart collections in a TV or movie library. So let me move into this. Let me go into the collection tab, and let me show you this one. So the gear here signifies that it's a smart collection, and it would be the same for a playlist. If I edit that, it's a very simple sort. I've changed the sort to episode. And then I've added some qualifiers. I'm matching all the following for the episode title, and the episode title has to contain Christmas. And then I sort by year. I could also sort by release date. And now pointing down means newest to oldest, and if I sort by release date again, now I'm actually sorting not by the year, but by the date they were released. And you'll see there's some Honeymooner episodes with the word Christmas in it, a Car 54, Beverly Hillbillies, The Lucy Show, That Girl. And as I slide down, these are just all the episodes on my server that have the word Christmas in it. So I created that before this current Christmas, and decorating the house, putting the tree up. Usually I just put Christmas music on. Well, I put this playlist on, or this collection actually, on my 65-inch TV, and just for a few hours things rolled through this way, and it was just something stupid to do, but you can do it. Now, I wish Plex added the word sitcom as its own genre, because then I could add that into the mix and get rid of shows like Doctor Who or The Buccaneers or let me see what else. The Legends of Tomorrow, Call of the Midwife. I'd rather have this just be Christmas episodes of sitcoms, but I can't do that with a smart collection. So smart playlists are very similar. And if you create new smart playlists, you really just need to create your own cloud document telling you how you set those up, and you can set them back up again. So just a suggestion, and I know I'm covered a lot of stuff that you may not think is relevant to your situation, but I wanted to talk a lot about a good foundation. I never have to worry about this, and now once it's set up, and because it's a Linux install, once it's set up, all you have to do is occasionally, I'm trying to find my spot, is back up this folder. Back up this folder someplace. Back it up to a portable drive. Back it up to another area on your NAS. And if your Plex server goes haywire, you don't need to do a database fix or anything. Just start from your last backup and rescan. If your media is all prepped correctly, it's going to scan back in the right way. And if you're using smart playlists as much as you can, missing content will fill back into the smart playlist versus a manual playlist, or a manual collection versus a smart collection, and you'll be back to square one. And I guess that's where I'll end it. At Plex's forums, the main Linux guy from Plex, his handle is Chuck PA. I don't know if PA stands for Pennsylvania or what it stands for, but he has written his own database tool. It will scan your database for issues, and it will try to repair it, but I don't really think you have a database issue. But later on I can find the link for you. Matt Peterson, the gentleman I spoke of that has a Dockerholics Plex group, he did a tutorial video on installing the database tool under Unraid. While my Plex server was still on my DS1520 NAS, I followed that tutorial almost to the T, and it worked on the Synology NAS. I did have to make one change. There's a different character to use in terminal to make sure your root on Unraid versus Synology, and I was able to get that tool installed there. So that's an option too, and I think that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to see if I can dig up the instructions for that I left myself and throw that into the Facebook thread just so you have it there while I'm thinking about it. So Christian, there's a lot to think about. In the beginning of the video, had my questions, so make sure you get those answers to me, because again, this is the most concerning thing. The package install of Plex Server should have created its own shared folder with structure that is already set up, and it should not be inside this. So some screenshots of this area is going to help me out a lot, and one way or the other we'll make a plan on moving forward. And again, anything I do with you or with our Facebook Messenger chats will not appear on YouTube, but there may be additional videos like this, because this video alone might help someone with just the information I covered to set up their Plex server correctly. So thanks for watching, and happy Plexing to everybody.